Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graben. Our guest today is Josh Chernikoff. He is a seasoned expert in the education sector. He's started a couple of businesses. He's got more than 20 years of experience in EdTech, sales, and entrepreneurship. He is the founder of the EdSales Elevation Experience. It's a 12-week program designed to help education companies build lead generation engines. So we're going to talk about that later in the episode. He's worked with hundreds of thousands of students and educational leaders, helping businesses scale with innovative and repeatable sales processes. He is a Milken-Penn GSE Competition Judge, a Start Ed mentor, and host of the podcast, Breaking the Grade. So Josh, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I appreciate the welcome. I appreciate that very warm welcome. I had forgotten about some of that stuff. So cool. Thank you for the reminder.
It was there on your LinkedIn page. I put it together into the bio, all accurate and correct, I hope.
All accurate and correct. And you said the name correctly, although there's always but you got it right.
Which name correctly?
My name, my last name. You nailed it.
Oh, Chernikoff. I did. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. I was afraid I'd made a mistake.
You nailed it.
Okay. Well, speaking of warm introductions, we had a very warm connection made by Hank Levine, who was a guest in episode 219 of this podcast series. How do you know Hank? You know, our listeners hopefully heard his episode. Great guy.
Yeah, let's see here. I mean, first of all, both Hank and I are from the Washington, D.C. area. Could probably do 1 degree of Jewish geography between the two of us if we really tried hard, which wouldn't be very hard. We're both in education and EdTech, and we were both at an event on June 21st at Penn's Graduate School of Education, where I was speaking about lead generation, and Hank sat in on my part of the day, and we got a chance to reconnect. And so it was nice to rekindle the relationship with him. And then we have all these things in common. So it was just kind of like off and running very quickly.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you now have in common is being a guest here. And I'm sure, like Hank, you've got a favorite mistake story. So Josh, what's your favorite mistake?
Yeah. You know, I've been thinking about this, my favorite mistake. And I guess my favorite mistake is also the one that really took me out the most and hurt the most financially. You know, and I kind of, for better or for worse, I think potentially choosing the wrong partners at the wrong time for my second business. And I wish those partners all of the best. So I don't hold any ill will towards them. But I don't think we were the right fit at that time for each other. I'm in the process of watching the show Suits.
I've never seen it.
It's a great show, and the two main characters, one of them is Harvey and one is Mike, and Harvey's really hard on Mike. He's really trying to teach him, but Harvey doesn't necessarily have the kind of the emotional skills to teach Mike the way he wants to be taught. And I had a relationship like that in my second business. With an investor who was also kind of our part-time CFO. And he wanted to teach me. He wanted to help. But the way he was teaching and helping was not working for me. And the business really struggled to move forward. Even though we had a phenomenal idea with our after-school enrichment business. We were in 82 schools up and down the East Coast, but we were struggling as a business internally. Then we made a pricing change, which was not done well by the partners, the other partners. That cost us a lot of money. And then we didn't see this one coming, but there was a worldwide pandemic if you didn't hear about it. And
so a shift to education at home, remote, didn't help with after school activities. Yeah.
Not at all. And you know, when the going gets tough, not everybody gets going in the right direction. And so it really caused the business to really struggle. So, you know, again, I don't, you know, as I don't know if you listen to Howard Stern, but, you know, only peace and love for those guys. But my choice of business partners I would also think that they would agree was not the right time, and we were not the right people for each other.
Yeah.
And that really cost the business a lot of success, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And, one thing, as we, dig into mistakes, and it's a word we all know and use, but, I think part of the context of the definition of a mistake is, when we make a decision, in the moment, we think it's the right decision, but then we learn there's something, down the road that makes clear that, things didn't turn out the way we predicted. So, thinking of, at the time, there was a prediction that investor and working as a CFO was the right move. Was it apparent pretty soon, like right away, of like, oh, this was a mistake, or did your view of that kind of evolve gradually as you were working together?
I would say that it was pretty apparent pretty quickly when we started working together that there was some serious personality differences, and that we would be leading the business. And so, but there was no turning back.
Mm-hmm.
Money had moved, contracts had been signed.
Yeah.
And so, we were going to try and make the best out of it. Again, I know that this particular person has a good heart,
Mm-hmm.
so he's a good person. Again, and I was a good person at the time. I believe I still am,
Mm-hmm.
but I was younger.
Yeah.
I was right now. I'm 45 now, so I was probably I was probably 35 or 33, 34.
Mm-hmm.
Different person.
Yeah.
And so again, the feedback I was receiving, the direction they wanted to take my business, it just didn't work well. And there was collateral damage. I had, again, I believe the business suffered in terms of success that we could have had. Success we measure by adding more schools. Money, of course, we could have made for all the shareholders. Partners that came in who were very close to me. We struggled in terms of, keeping those relationships tight. So, but I think at the root, it just, again, wasn't the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
Had it been now, honestly, might be a better fit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm more receptive to feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and really focus more on margins and P&Ls and things like that.
Yeah. So other than, it sounds like, what I hear you saying that you changed, grew, matured. Was there another lesson learned, like if you were going to be in a similar situation in the future, lesson learned about how to evaluate personality fit up front and maybe trying to avoid that same situation? Or is there advice that you might have for others of, how do you know if it's really going to work out working together so closely?
I think, to answer that last question, maybe working on something first together, a smaller project, is potentially one way of doing that. I was obsessed, to use an overused term right now, with expansion and getting investors. Got friends and family in my first business, and that and more in my second. And I was obsessed with expanding out of the Washington, D.C. area. Can't do things over again. But as I coach people in education, I always encourage them to really try and dominate where you live first, especially in education, so that you can get out there, you can go meet in K-12, go meet the principals, go meet the teachers, go meet the superintendents that you are transforming their lives, to understand how you are transforming their lives with your product, and learn it and learn it and learn it. And, so we did that to a degree in DC, but I wanted to get to New York. I wanted to get to Connecticut. I wanted to get to New Jersey. And you can do those things, but the synergies aren't there for scale.
Mm-hmm.
And that begins to hurt the business and take your eye off the ball
Yeah.
of really quality delivery. And then if you put all that aside, a lot of people come to me for lead generation and they say, well, I'm in the process of raising money. And I'm like, for what?
Mm-hmm.
You haven't done anything yet. You want an investor to come in when you figured it out. That's how you get your leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, I'm talking to a lot of investors. I'm like, I'm not surprised. That's what they're paid to do.
Yeah.
They're
But are they investing?
they're looking for a needle in a haystack. So they're
Yeah.
happy to take a 15, 20-minute call. They're
Yeah.
happy to throw out, and I don't blame them. They're happy to throw out, a term sheet that sucks. But at the end of the day, you need to get traction.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to have, a really good offer. You need to have a really good lead gen system. You need to be a subject matter expert. Those three things, basic. There's obviously many more things to do, but those three basic things are going to help lead you towards leads on repeat, so that investor can pour gasoline on the fire. Period.
Right.
Hard stop. I don't really think I'll ever have business partners again.
Mm-hmm.
I say that now,
Yeah.
but maybe it's just that even though I'm a good person and I love people, maybe I just don't really want partners in my business. And maybe that's where I've evolved too.
Yeah. I want to talk more about the coaching and the work that you do around lead generation and sales processes. But I was wondering if you would, Josh, if you could talk us through a little bit more about, you said, a pricing change that wasn't done well. If you could share kind of like what the expectation or prediction was versus how that played out.
Yeah. In my second business, I had 3 pricing strategies, and we worked very closely with providers. And so the second strategy, we decided to lower our take from the providers, like the Kung Fu provider, the pottery provider, but we kept their payment the same. And we had our highest volume of sales, but we weren't making enough to cover what we had to pay out. Plus,
Right.
because we had more programs running, we needed more people on the ground, we needed more people in the back office, and we ended up losing, I'll just say, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And that came out of the partners.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the knife was put in my back.
Yeah.
Whether or not I believed I should have gotten the only knife, it doesn't matter. I did.
Yeah.
I took it. Not happily, but I took it. And we got through it. Like we were on the other side of it. And then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
And so it's really too bad because we did rally, fixed it and rallied.
Yeah.
But it was, just kind of one of those things that, at the end of the day, even though we did financially rally, we never recovered from that together.
Well, and it sounded like there was an impact on relationships, not just the bottom line.
And that's the part that we never really recovered.
Yeah.
It's just the trust was gone. The fun was gone, although we were trying to recreate it. And think about that. When I say it, it makes it sound like a romantic relationship, but being in bed, quote unquote, with partners is kind of like that, and you can lose your love for each other and it's tough to rekindle.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you made me think a little bit when you talked about the idea of mitigating the risk of getting into bed to quote unquote a business marriage with a co-founder or investors. That small project might be kind of like dating a little bit first, of not just kind of an initial review of a profile or an introduction that's made. And just kind of, to try to test that out. And, people in business or in life still go through that and get married. And sadly, things don't work out. It makes me think, is there a part of the analogy? How often do co-founders go to counseling to say, hey, we're committed to working this out, as opposed to just giving up on each other?
That's a really interesting business idea. I've never thought about that, and
Uh,
I didn't even see it coming when you were just mentioning it. But that is a really interesting idea. I don't know if it exists. I don't know if it would have worked for us,
yeah.
but I would have been willing to try it.
Mm. I need to reach out. I've had a lot of psychologists and counselors on the show. I should reach out to some of them because I think some of them have delved into business coaching, and I'm curious how much of that relationship work applies. But
It's very
that's
interesting.
I bet
Yeah.
if there's something there, somebody who's probably working in that direction. But let's talk about your work, Josh. And I mean, one phrase I think is interesting is repeatable sales process, or even just to talk about sales process. Like how often do people push back and say, look, every deal is unique. Don't force too much. Don't stifle me with process. Like, is there
Mhm.
pushback around process, or is that a mistake to think process doesn't apply?
I think it's a big mistake. I've made the mistake. And I think that, um, I have built this business based on objections and rejection.
Mm,
Um, I can walk you through a process that I can see in my own head um, when it's my signature solution. And a signature solution is my clearest way of describing my business to you. Generally, it's done visually, but my 9-step process that takes about 12 weeks to do starts with really understanding your ideal client, which most people
mm,
have done.
mhm,
They haven't
mhm.
necessarily done it my way, and we work through that, and then we build out credibility, and we think about the value of credibility. And credibility is not your LinkedIn profile with all of the awards and schools you've ever been to.
Yeah.
Credibility is you being a subject matter expert. Credibility is you talking about things that your ideal client cares about, whether it's on LinkedIn or on a show like this, or in a blog post or being published somewhere. And then we go through a campaign. It's called the Raise Your Hand campaign. And in the Raise Your Hand campaign, it's interesting. It's about 4 weeks into my program. I lose about 20% of the people for a little while.
Hmm.
The Raise Your Hand campaign is the first opportunity for you to get objections and rejections about your business
Mm,
because you think this is your ideal client and you have built out your LinkedIn based on who you think you are and how you can help somebody, your headline. I help who using what method get which results. When we do the Raise Your Hand, we do it in LinkedIn and we ask people, I'd like to talk to you about some stuff. I'd like to ask you questions. We're not there to sell. We're
mhm.
just there to kind of really gather information. And if people don't respond, it just shows that you're not the subject matter expert you think you are at this point,
Mm,
or maybe they're not your ideal client.
mhm.
And what we learn from listening, we create our signature solution. You, any of my other clients, always emerge with a signature solution, a 9-step process from confusion to clarity and the transformation that occurs when you work with a client. And then we move into this portion of targeting and then messaging.
Mhm.
I don't care how good your credibility is. I don't care how long your list of emails is. I don't care how much listening you've done. If your messaging is not good, while your open rates might be good, if people don't reply, the messaging isn't working.
Yeah.
And then we move up into what we call the engine phase,
Mhm.
which is when we start automating and scaling and using machines to get you more and more leads. I mean, when we're at our peak, we're getting about 600 to 800 emails per week at a 30% open rate
Mhm.
and about a 10% reply rate.
It sounds like there's a parallel to what you talked about, an investor wanting to put money into something where it's already been figured out. Like some people in the lean startup community talk about product market fit. You've got to find that, you've got to experiment, and then once you've got it, boom, move forward. It sounds like your process is maybe around making mistakes or iterating to find what works and then automate it. Otherwise, it sounds like a mistake to automate something that's not working well, right?
Yeah, and I think so. Yes, on the mistakes, but more importantly, it's on the objections.
Mm-hmm.
I like people to run towards the objections. what about my process doesn't work for you?
Mm. Yeah.
And I want you or my ideal client to be completely aligned with my process.
Mm-hmm.
When I walk away from my strategy calls, I call them self-identification calls, because I'm going to ask you a set of questions about what you think lead generation should be for your education company. And the way you answer those helps me to determine if you're a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to talk to you about my process. And we have to be 100% aligned on my process, because we are going to drink the Kool-Aid together. And assuming we're drinking the same Kool-Aid and you're drinking my 3E Kool-Aid, this process will work for you.
Yeah.
And then I guarantee it with people, which sounds cheesy even coming out of my mouth right now, that I can guarantee it. But the difference is, in my first business, which was a tutoring business, parents would say, hey, I want my kid to go from a D to an A.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guarantee? I say, we spend 2 hours a week with your kid. I have no idea. We're going to bring it for those 2 hours. In my second business, the after school enrichment, we would raise funds for PTAs, and they would say, hey, can you raise us $50,000? I'd say, I'll raise you $100,000, but you gotta promote. You got to get people to sign up. But I won't guarantee anything. In this business, I can, because there are some companies in education that get my work, they get my system 8 weeks into a 12-week program. Some, it could take 24 or 36 weeks, but I will keep working with them until they get it, because it's just a matter of tweaking what we know works.
Yeah. So when you talk about objections, it sounds like your approach, your process of running toward the objections is different than quote unquote objection handling, as people might talk about it in sales. I think of what I've heard of objection handling is, oh, you got to have that response ready. Someone gives you an objection and you're sort of trying to prove them wrong, or why that's, but running what you're describing sounds like a different approach of not trying to say you're wrong, but more about, let me learn from what your objection is.
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Let's just take conferences, for example. Especially in the education space, I hear a lot of people say that, I go to conferences and they're a total waste.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, okay, I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. I used to not like conferences. What is it about the conferences that's not working? Well, I spend a lot of time and money to get there. And I hand out my business card, boom, 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 boom. I take a lot of business cards. I pay for a booth. I get home. I've got to do my own work, and I've got to do all the follow-up from the conference. Well, okay. Some of those things we can help with, and some of them we can't. Let's talk about your messaging. When you're at that conference, tell me what you do.
Yeah.
Tell me who you are. And let's use a formula.
Yeah. When you have that first interaction, someone wanders by the booth. Oh, hi, who are you?
Chewing gum, looking at their phone, not wanting to be noticed, and you walk up to them and you say, I am who? And in my case, now I have the confidence to walk up to people and say, my name is Josh Chernikoff. I help companies in education generate 15 to 20 high quality leads per month using my method, the EdSales Elevation Experience method. You want to learn more?
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
And when you can do that at a conference, it really helps to make that conference more rich.
Yeah.
Because you're going to find the people who want to learn from you and who might be your ideal client. Yeah. And it changes the whole experience. So, I can't necessarily change those objections of spending a lot of money, taking a lot of time, business cards throwing away, things like that. Yeah. But if we get to the root of the issue, which in this case might be messaging, if we fix that, you're going to have a much better experience at the conference. So understanding people's objections and, so back to my own business, right? People will say, I go to conferences all the time and it's such a waste for me for lead gen. And I'm like, well, actually, what if I told you I can show you how to do it the right way?
Yeah. Say the way they're doing it is a waste.
I've got a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tell them why we do what we do, and I don't tell them how.
Yeah.
The how is when you join our cohort and you really get a chance to dive in with myself, and really important to point out, we've had 97 companies go through the EdSales Elevation Experience.
Mm-hmm.
And all those 97 companies are still tight. We've created this little community that's growing.
Yeah.
And everybody's there to support each other as well. So not only do people join the EdSales Elevation Experience, but they join our growing community too, which is pretty wonderful.
Yeah. So, right there on your LinkedIn profile, and you said it, and you were kind of giving the advice earlier about, I help who using which method to get which results. That's there at the beginning of your LinkedIn profile. I help companies in education build lead generation engines that book 12 to 20. So maybe you're doing better now, 15 to 20.
We're doing better.
Go update the
nice
profile.
Catch.
Highly qualified sales calls a month through my 12-week EdSales Elevation Experience. So that's prompting me to think through what my LinkedIn headline would say or should say using a format like that. What's my messaging? And so my one question for you here is that it sounds like this approach could help me or someone like me who's selling speaking, consulting, coaching, various services. I'm not in education or EdTech or EdSales, but so I mean, why limit yourself to EdSales, or is it just a matter of like that's the people you love working with, that's kind of your ideal client, even though it sounds like this methodology could help others, right?
100%.
Yeah.
It could. I'm very proud to say that I only work in education because these are the people I know how to sell to, and I know the objections and rejections going into it. There's not one that I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
So it's very powerful to be able to tell people that. My cohorts, we're starting 2 cohorts this week. In the past, we've had one cohort that starts every 3 months of 10 companies in education. And we're starting one on this coming Tuesday. And we had a wait list.
Yeah.
We got to 11 to 12 to 13. I said, okay, we'll open a Thursday one. And we've only got 2 slots open there. And they're all companies in education, because my companies that I work with are not necessarily struggling with what you might be struggling with. Can I help you? Would I love to? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in terms of what people see me as, it's a subject matter expert in lead generation in education, which is a very tough place to sell. Yeah. It is my hope, and believe me, she knows this, that our daughter Camila, who, has been selling bracelets at her school long before we knew about that, will one day take this business and will say, my old man, the guy could only sell to companies in education, but I have taken everything he knew and taught me, and now we're teaching it to the world. She can take the business in that direction, but for me right now, it is most powerful to stay in my lane in education.
Sure.
I believe in the power of one. It's one of the most important parts of what we teach to our clients, because our clients, especially in education, have multiple stakeholders.
Yeah.
Especially in K-12. Are you selling to a superintendent? Are you selling to a principal, a teacher, a PTA, a parent, a district administrator? And we figure out the one group that you're selling to, that one group that you can talk to directly about all of their challenges. Granted, we want to be able to demonstrate the benefits to the other stakeholders, but we want you to talk to one key stakeholder about the transformations that would occur by you working with them.
Yeah.
So I practice what I preach.
Yeah. So Josh, from your experience and observation working with others, what are some of the most common sales mistakes that are either unique to your space in education or just broadly more generally?
Number one, no clear offer. I long ago began to believe that the confused mind does not buy. And what I've also learned is that the confused mind can't sell shit. So not only is it important for people to hear you that you have one offer, in my case, right? We just talked about that. But it's important for you to have one offer to communicate as well.
As opposed to a portfolio that I just heard myself describe. Kind of trying to apply this to myself, it sounds like I don't have one clear offer. If you want to call me I'm calling myself a confused mind.
Could be.
Yeah.
I think that if you are clear on your offer and you are years and decades in the making, that's one thing. But if you're, $1 million less in revenue, one clear offer, getting damn good at that is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people don't have a lead generation system. I know this for sure in education. I hear it in other businesses is they're just looking for that next lead, figure it out, next contract, next grant, next conversation. And these things need to be on the repeat. I always think of it, I'm a big golfer, not a good golfer, but a big golfer, that it's got to be like when you get that driver in your hand, it's got to just be the same thing every single time, nice and easy, and get that power when you pull that club down, but it shouldn't be different, and it shouldn't be a tense situation.
Mm-hmm.
When you have leads on repeat, when you follow a system, I call it a concrete closing system, you don't necessarily have to worry. I just got off 2 phone calls. One of them with a woman, very successful, who I could tell just wasn't bought in. And I said, hey,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to do a follow-up 45-minute call, there's no charge. It's my strategy call. Let's do it. Next person, we were 10 minutes in. And I said, my next thing is a strategy call. I was like, let's book it. Because he was bought in. He gets it.
Yeah.
So a clear offer and knowing then, having the confidence to know that you could get leads on repeat.
Yeah.
And then finally, having credibility. I believe credibility sells overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody's reading a post from you on LinkedIn, if somebody's getting an email and they've never heard from you, if somebody's hearing you on a show, most likely they're going to Google your name. Hopefully they can spell your last name like mine.
Yeah.
And what can happen is, yes, are they going to see your website? Most likely first. They'll dig for the about section, but most likely they're going to look for your LinkedIn first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't teach a LinkedIn course, but I think LinkedIn is a great place to boost your own credibility and play, because people know how to read LinkedIn profiles very quickly.
Yeah.
And if they are sales funnels, not resumes, sales funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And think of it as a funnel. Your banner, your picture, your headline, we talked about that. Your about section should ask questions of your ideal client. Your about section should demonstrate credibility. Your about section should have a call to action. That is a funnel. And that's what we're going for. So you asked me about kind of mistakes and things that people don't do. I'm telling you things that people need to do. Yeah. They need to have a clear offer. They need to have a lead gen system, and they need to be building their credibility day in and day out.
Yeah. When I see and I'll link to your profile in the show notes, it starts right off. Is your education business struggling to gain traction? Are you having a hard time pinpointing your ideal client and how to gain their business? Do you want a dialed in sales process to attract new clients and transform your bottom line? And then it's not all questions, but it'd be interesting. I'm going to spend more time looking at your page as a model there, and maybe do some experiments. But I wanted to ask also, when we talk about lead generation in a funnel, that a certain percentage of leads are going to turn into the goal of sales generation, happy client generation. How important is it, to think about finding the right leads, or the leads most likely to convert, instead of just getting more leads?
At the ripe old age of 45, I would say it's the most important thing. But had you asked, granted the times were different, but had you asked me at 25 or 30, and you said, Josh, hey man, I just came across a list of 10,000 people in education. Do you want it? Like, sweet. I'll email them and see what happens.
10,000 leads.
Yeah, great. Right. One of them has to work. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Right.
The email game has changed, and it's much better to clearly understand who wants to work with you, find them, give them value, and then kind of bring them into your orbit. And when the time is right, when the money's right, they'll make that decision.
Yeah.
But they have to first trust you and believe in you and your system. So I 100% think that there is no reason to attract or generate leads that aren't going to be high quality or high converting.
Yeah.
Waste of time.
But the question is, or I guess figuring out over time is, how do we figure out which of those leads are better, and how do we find more of that person or that organization?
In my process, that happens in the Raise Your Hand campaign.
Yeah.
By listening, by really listening to what the challenges are. For example, of people in K-12. We had a client. Her name is Toy, and she runs a wonderful organization called EntreEd. And Toy's organization mainly works with schools up and down I-81, kind of Appalachia. And Toy was doing her Raise Your Hand campaigns, and she was asking all these principals, what are your biggest challenges right now? And they said, well, it's retaining teachers. And she heard that over and over and over again. And Toy came back to me and said, well, we have a little problem because they just want to retain their teachers. And I said, no, Toy, you have our answer.
Yeah.
EntreEd provides professional development for teachers. So we changed the conversation. We went back and we said to these principals, we have a way to retain your teachers, and it happens to be rooted in entrepreneurship. Are you interested? And they all said yes. So by listening to people, we were able to take the business in a direction that it needed to go at that time, post-pandemic. Wasn't necessarily what she wanted to hear. That goes back to that objection and rejection part. But it was where the business needed to go.
Yeah.
And we went there together. So I think that, how do you find more of your ideal clients? First, you listen to them, and then you're able to target them, and you see what resonates by putting messages out there, by putting emails out there, by putting content on LinkedIn. What resonates, what gets engagement.
Yeah.
And they will come to you. I mean, it is kind of build it, they will come. If you build the right business, your ideal clients will come.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a great story and a lot of great insights. Again, we're joined today, Josh Chernikoff. One thing I did not put in your bio, but I'm going to ask you about here at the end as we start to wrap up here, that you started your career as a TV sports broadcaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was I didn't know if that was going to be your favorite mistake story, or how did you get in? It's just kind of fascinating. How'd you get into that and move away from that?
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I grew up when the Washington Post was people like Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser, Tom Boswell, some of the greatest sports writers of our time.
Yeah.
I grew up in Washington, D.C., where the George Michael sports machine started.
Not the guy from Wham. I remember
not the guy from Wham.
I remember this George Michael.
Yeah, and he had the sports machine.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in a town that was just littered with phenomenal sports writers and sports personalities on TV. So I only wanted to be on TV doing sports. And print journalism, undergrad at American University, although you would say I probably majored in partying and I would have graduated, with honors. But then I went to Northwestern Graduate School of Education, Medill, got my master's in broadcast, and literally drove from Chicago to Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Because that's where careers start in television.
That's where they start,
right?
baby.
Yeah, places,
James Madison.
Towns, small market.
Small market, James Madison University, WHSV TV, where I got to cover, JMU, which has now kind of become a little sports disruptor in college sports. I covered Bridgewater College, which was a D3 powerhouse in football. And I got to cover the Washington Redskins. And so I went from Harrisonburg for 2 years, where I was kind of the sports guy along with another guy, and went to work for the Skins. So when I left TV, I thought that I'd never get back. So the fact that you and I are having this conversation, the fact that I've got this beautiful mic, The fact that I record my own shows, that's all one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there is not a live event. I go live every Thursday at 1:00 Eastern to my network.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a live that doesn't go by that I don't think, I cannot believe that I am restreaming this to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where, and I kid you not, when I was in Harrisonburg, our lives were called Look Lives because we would take a very long cord, I mean very long, we would run it from the production studio down a hallway to the front of the TV station, out to the main square in Harrisonburg, and we would go live from there. There was no live truck. So while I am not in TV the way I used to be, I feel blessed every single day that I get to stand in front of this mic or talk to you and have these conversations.
Yeah. Well, I bet there's a lot of lessons about being a good communicator, an effective communicator, an engaging communicator. A lot of so I was Northwestern undergrad, but engineering, right? So very, very different. But Michael Wilbon, graduate of Northwestern, who's been on the board of trustees for a long time. But yeah, the Medill School, like half the people on, or maybe a third, I don't know. Like ESPN seems to be Northwestern, Medill, Syracuse, Missouri, and maybe a few outliers.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was, you talk about the biggest mistakes. I'll tell you one of the hardest things I ever had to do was my year at Northwestern. That school does not mess around. I graduated on time, but it was hard. I'll tell you, there was a professor named Joseph Ngati, and we were kind of doing our Medill broadcast network, live to the campus.
Yeah.
And Professor Ngati, granted, this was a while ago, so things were different, right? But Professor Ngati was counting us down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're supposed to be done talking, and I just kept talking.
Yeah.
And he said, he pushed his little microphone button, you can hear it in the speakers. And he says, Josh, come see me in the production room. He kicked everybody else out there. And he really basically threw me up against a wall. And guess what? I deserved it.
Verbally or like physically? Or
a little bit of both.
Both, yeah.
A little bit, and I don't mind it. Again, times are a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I was disrespecting the rules of Professor Ngati's studio. I was disrespecting the rules and of the people around me. And so that was a tough year.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful year.
Was that a broadcast version of I know enough people in journalism from Northwestern, otherwise the Medill F? Was there I think of that as writing, like if you spelled the name wrong, if the story was otherwise good but you got some verifiable fact wrong, it was an F. Yeah. Was there something similar in broadcast?
Basically, Professor Ngati that day gave me the Medill, get the F out of here. I don't want to see you. And he was right. But you know what? I can't stand crosstalk.
Yeah.
When they're so many dumb things are said when they're counting you down to get out, especially local news. And I am an absolute stickler for proper names, pronouncing them correctly, writing them the right way. Yeah. And if I do make a mistake, we correct it as fast as we can, and I apologize. So yeah, I was a recipient of many Medill Fs. That one was just to get the F out of here.
Yeah. Well,
and I deserved it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We get a bonus story there from you, Josh. So I'm glad I asked. So our guest today, Josh Chernikoff. I will put links to his LinkedIn profile, his website, joshchernikoff.com, and a lot to check out there, a lot to think about. So thank you for sharing, not only your stories and mistakes around entrepreneurship, and appreciate the thoughts around what professionals in different spaces can do to more effectively market ourselves and generate the right leads. So thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just put this out there that while I am super focused on the education space, if I can help anybody, of course, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to always play around with headlines and talk to people about LinkedIn or their business.
Yeah.
So I'm here to help as much as I can. I just happen to focus my business on education, but always
Yeah.
willing and happy to help.
Okay. Well, thanks again. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Thank you.